Hi there, my name's Katie and sometimes I quilt. This week what I'm going to do is a little bit of an update on some of my works in progress. And I mean a little bit of an update on some of them because, as probably alluded to at the very end of last week's video, I've been away. I've went to Melbourne for a conference for a few days, so back in Canberra now. Got back to the machine, but hand stitching has actually been my focus. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by there's a lovely parrot just out there. Anyhow, so at my machine, a little raven's eye for context. I intend to do the whole raven, not just his eye, his or her eye, their eye. It is part of the stitch along that I've sort of been dabbling in, but time has been against me. So we'll see how that goes. I am downloading all the patterns though, and I may get back to them, or it may become a series of cushions, but I absolutely adore the raven. So I predict I will keep going with that one, at least, anyway. The other thing that I've been working on a lot lately is what I call my Not Wedding Quilt. So if you've been over on the Instagram, I'll just get my needle, secure my needle here. You would have noticed me working on this. Now, it is the centerpiece of a quilt, and when I went away, I think I'd done 2 of these and I was sort of about at that stage there, and I was stuck in a ballroom for 3 days with some really lovely people talking about really lovely issues. But like so many people, I need something to help me stay focused, and this was my something. So where I'm at now is these little bits here where I'm doing the reverse applique, which for those who don't know, reverse applique is where you're cutting the front away to reveal the back. So we're doing some reverse applique to get the little cutouts to appear. I think I've got like 3.5 of those to go and then that's done. So I sat in bed last night watching some YouTube videos and did that bit. For transparency, there's the back. I'm really enjoying this project, and this project has a little bit of history. So it's a reproduction quilt, and it's a reproduction of a quilt that I saw online, and I'll put all of the details and links in the box below. But I had been through something quite traumatic in 2019, so before 2020. I came into 2020 traumatized, and when I got through that initial trauma incident, I landed back in Australia and then headed straight into a quilt show and did shopping, as one does. And one of the things that I desperately wanted during that period was happy and joy, and liberty. It brings happy and joy. And I also knew that going into 2020, I was supposed to be doing a lot of travel. I was supposed to be doing some international travel and conferences and things like that. But, you know, obviously for other reasons that didn't pan out. I did do a tiny bit of travel at the beginning of 2020. I went up and saw my sister in Queensland. But I wanted to have something that was portable, and something that I could use on, you know, planes and trains and things like that to keep me amused and to keep me stitching. Because one of the things that I needed at that point in my life, and that in a lot of ways I still need, is something to be able to see progress, some stitching to see movement. Anyway, this was it for me. So what it is, and here's bits of the pattern. It is the Chester Criswell quilt, and this is a part of the pattern, and I've bought it off Etsy and I've printed it out and I'm working my way through it. This isn't all of the pattern. I've got more of it upstairs. But it's an applique quilt. It's a reproduction quilt. So one of the things, and the patterns by Sharon Barnes of 2 bits patches, and I bought it through her Etsy shop, is that it's got a story to go with each of the blocks, and it's really quite fascinating to see what the blocks are called and all that sort of thing. And the reason why I did it is because of that. So the Chester Queersville quilt has got, I haven't counted how many blocks. I actually don't want to know yet. But I've done quite a few, and each one has got names, and the names are associated with the people who made the blocks in the first place. And so, for example, block 9 is Eliza Whiteside, and there's a bit about each one of the blocks and a bit of a story, and it's all really lovely. There's a little bit of history on each of the blocks, and then they all come together quite well. I don't have a picture of this quilt on a wall. I might see if I can do that this week sometime, and I'll post it over on the Insta. But what I have got is a handful of blocks done. So my centre block. Now, the original is traditional colours, so it's cream background with greens and reds. I think there might have been a little bit of yellow, I can't remember. But I'm doing mine on a variety of backgrounds, and some of them are light and some of them are dark, and with my Liberty. So this is primarily what I'm doing with my Liberty stash. So, I mean, it's a good reason to collect more. But what I've done with, and I'll show you some of these blocks now, so that's some of the ones I've done. So I think this one was the first one I did, maybe. And these blocks have been stitched through different points of what I'm going on in my life. So, for example, this one here was stitched planes and trains going to visit my sister and niece and brother-in-law in Queensland. This one's probably another one that's done that as well. I've also stitched some sitting at bedsides. So, like, we had obviously the events of 2020, and COVID meant that there were only really under particular situations that you could get in to see people. And one of my grandmothers was, she passed away in April of 2020. Her life was bookended by pandemics because she was 102. So she had been a very small child baby during the Spanish flu pandemic at the beginning of last century. So I stitched some of that at her bedside. Just looking here. So I'm using all sorts of colours for backgrounds. Darks, there's greys in there. This one here has got a cutout in the centre, so some reverse applique needs to happen in the centre here. But I haven't actually decided, I haven't marked it, and I don't know what shape to put in there yet. I'll figure that out when I get closer to finishing. It's got a very ink blotty vibe. I've probably got more that I've done, and they're in the bottom of my bag here. But here's a couple that I've got prepped, ready to go. So these ones here are just waiting for me to stitch them down. So that one and that one. I suspect what I'll do over the next little while is put them all up on a wall, because I've got different backgrounds that I want to use. And here's some I think I've cut. Some different backgrounds and things. Like little circles on it, which is cute. I'm trying not to repeat backgrounds, but I will repeat Liberty because that stuff's expensive. So I've got quite a bit that I've picked up at different places. Oh, here's some backgrounds that I've cut out. So I've obviously thought about it. I love this background. I've used this in a different quilt and I want to use it in this one. But I want to be able to get it so that when the little animals, like there's bees and crosses and shapes and things, I want to get one of them to appear. But then there's the Liberty itself. And I've got a bit. So I've got a bit of Liberty. But what I love is that I can add to it. And I've got some quite precious ones. So I've got some Hello Kitty, Liberty. I've got a couple of pieces of that. I should go back and have a look online and see if I can get some more. That would be fun. There's another piece. I've got some bits that friends brought me back from the UK when they've travelled. So I think this was a gift. But I pick up scrap bags and things like that of it at shows, and sometimes shops have them. But what I want out of this quilt in the end is it's going to be a little bit of not a statement, but I'm calling it my Not Wedding Quilt. Because so many times we make these big quilts, well, in the past these big quilts were made collectively for a bride and groom and happy wishes and all of that sort of stuff on their future, but which is, something we all support. Hey, baby. And one of the things that I've been doing alongside this, possibly because of the nature of the quilt, where I have done it at bedsides, I've sewn it on planes going to visit family, it's really been wrapped up in me and my connections with other people. So, and particularly family members. So this is my Not Wedding Quilt because I'm not doing it for a wedding. It could be considered a wedding quilt where lots of people have done individual blocks and all that sort of thing. But in the end, what I want to do is probably embroider some of the names of particularly women that have meant a lot to me during the making of this quilt. So I hit upon an idea a while ago, and it's put me down quite a rabbit hole of looking at women's names, and in particular the loss of their name post-marriage. So in some ways it's more of a recent phenomenon where a lot of the time women kept their maiden names and had them, they moved, sort of shuffled up the line to be a middle name. My grandfather's middle name, one of them is his mother's maiden name. So they have kept that connection as well. And one of the things that I've done is I've gone back and I've started to pay more attention in my own family tree to the women's names. So my mother was a Dugan, and then her mother was a Drummond, and then her mother, and it goes back, and it changes, for me anyway, it kind of changes things slightly, where instead of the focus being on the masculine line and the father handing down all of this stuff, it's like, what if we have a look at the other side of the tree and look at the way that women's contributions to all of this have also been. But, you know, that's just me being an academic for a moment. But anyway, this is my Not Wedding Quilt. It's the Chester Criswell quilt, and I'll put the details down below. The other thing that I've been doing while traveling and hand stitching is watching YouTube videos of quilt market. So watching what new fabric lines and things like that are coming out of the US. And it's been, for someone that's on the other side of the planet, it's been quite interesting to watch, because I know right now that some of them were interesting fabric lines, but interesting to me fabric lines we won't get here in Australia. If I want them, I'm going to have to order them online from the US, which is a thing. And that's a whole different thing. And it's really interesting to me to see the types of fabric prints and how they're being promoted, and how we are only seeing, by the nature of things, we are only seeing sort of snippets of what's coming out. I'm seeing a lot of modern prints. I'm seeing a lot of, and that's fine. I mean, obviously I work with modern, but I also really like my reproductions as well. And I wouldn't have minded seeing some of those. So yeah, just an observation, but it could just be that's what the YouTube algorithm is giving me. There could be a whole thing about consumerism, and I'm seeing a lot of that sort of discourse online at the moment about, you know, too many fabric lines, too many choice. It's like, but there are whole fabric, like, controversial opinion. I don't like Keith facet fabric. It's just not my vibe. It's not my thing, but I'm really happy for it to be other people's things, because then there's stuff for me too. Solids and me come and go as to whether or not I like them. So one of my jobs in the next week is to bind a quilt that's come back from the long armour and get it ready to go on to its next stage of its journey. That's probably going to be next week. And it's a quilt that I've done out of solids in a colour palette that's not particularly mine, and I'll probably talk a bit about that. But again, great for other people. And one of the things that I came back to when I came back from Melbourne is I went searching for a piece of fabric and discovered that the baskets that I'd been using to store my stash in have started to stain my fabric, which, I mean, it started to stain my reproduction stash, so it's not really a huge deal because it kind of looks lived in now. It's a vibe. But it's meant that I have pulled every single piece of fabric that I own that is on that set of shelves in those types of baskets off the shelves and repack them into plastic, so that, you know, hopefully there's no transfer of colour from the basket into the fabric and it changes things. But that's meant that I've actually handled about 90% of my stash in the last few days. I've got a couple of bits to go. I might post about it on the Insta, I don't know. But it's that whole, I've got so much and yet I don't have as much as I thought I did. I'm actually a little bit surprised that there's not more there. But also I've got two distinct stashes. I've got my modern stash and I've got my traditional stash. And I'm not quite sure what's bringing me joy, or if it's a case of I need to start bringing them together and doing more interesting things with them. So we'll see what happens. But that's all I've really got for rambling this week. I hope you all have a good week, and thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.